Netflix has been spending insane amounts of money lately, like really crazy amounts, and most of these big budget movies they've been putting out, nobody likes them. Just this March, Netflix dropped their biggest budget movie yet, called The Electric State. Cost them at least $320 million to make. That puts it right up there in the top 15 most expensive movies ever. And Netflix somehow just doesn't seem to care that these things don't make a dime at the box office. It's weird, because back in 2022, Netflix made it sound like they were done with all these massive vanity projects. You know, the ones that cost hundreds of millions, but nobody remembers. Well, turns out they weren't done at all. Budgets actually went even higher. Since 2022, they've put out a bunch of these movies, spent over $1.5 billion total, and most of them turned out to be absolute bombs. Everybody hated them. Here's a few examples of exactly what I'm talking about. This was supposed to be Cameron Diaz's big comeback. She'd been gone from movies for 11 years, and Jamie Foxx was coming back too after some serious health issues. Big stars, big return, this should have been a layup. But no, movie's terrible. Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it 29%. Audience didn't like it either, and it's sitting at a 2.4 on Letterboxd. And Netflix spent $200 million on this thing. It's about Diaz and Foxx. They're married, used to be CIA operatives, trying to live quietly. But they accidentally show up in a viral video. One of their old enemies spots them, and they're pulled right back into the spy life. One critic at The Guardian basically said it's good to see Cameron Diaz back, but she probably should have picked a better movie. But here's what's weird. Netflix actually paid Diaz $45 million to come out of retirement for 2 movies, and this thing ended up being one of their biggest hits ever. Number 6 all-time at Netflix, came out in January, which is usually where studios dump their worst movies. So I guess, yeah, Diaz can still pull people in, even for a movie nobody actually liked. Then there's The Electric State. This is that $320 million beast I mentioned earlier, most expensive Netflix movie ever made, directed by the Russo brothers who did some Marvel stuff, starring Millie Bobby Brown and Chris Pratt. Huge project. But when it finally came out in March, nobody liked it. Critics gave it a brutal 14% on Rotten Tomatoes. Letterboxd ratings were 2.1. The story's set in some dystopian 90s future, after a big war between humans and robots. Millie Bobby Brown plays Michelle, a teenager teaming up with a veteran played by Pratt, trying to take down some mega corporation controlling the world. Sounds kinda interesting, but everyone who saw it said the same thing. It's just boring. Like painfully boring. Critics called it obvious, garish, and just plain dumb. Basically, they said it's the kind of expensive disaster that makes Netflix originals look bad. Before The Electric State, Netflix's most expensive movie was Red Notice. Again, around $200 million, huge stars, Dwayne Johnson, Ryan Reynolds, Gal Gadot, big spy adventure, globe-trotting, everything you'd think would be fun. Except it wasn't. Nobody liked this movie either. Rotten Tomatoes critics gave it 37%. Letterboxd was around 2.5. Netflix said it's their most watched movie ever, over 230 million views. But you talk to anyone about it, and all you get is a shrug. The plot doesn't help. They're chasing some expensive jeweled egg. Gadot's a thief, Johnson's an agent, Reynolds is another thief helping Johnson out. But the movie just keeps twisting and turning so much that eventually you just give up caring. Critics didn't hold back. Vanity Fair called it limp and dull, saying it somehow makes 3 super charismatic stars look totally bland. Even Quentin Tarantino weighed in on these kinds of Netflix blockbusters. He called out Netflix directly, especially these Ryan Reynolds movies that Netflix pays him millions to make, saying nobody even remembers them 5 minutes after watching. Like, they're movies that basically don't exist in the culture. And honestly, he's right. This one is a buddy comedy with Kevin Hart and Mark Wahlberg. Sounds simple enough. Hart's a stay-at-home dad, takes a break to reconnect with his childhood buddy Wahlberg. Chaos follows. Fine, right? Except it cost $80 million. $80 million. For basically a raunchy dad comedy. Rotten Tomatoes score was just 7%. Letterboxd gave it around 2 stars. Even Kevin Hart fans hated it. Netflix apparently just threw money at the wall on this one, hoping something would stick. It didn't. It's not funny at all. Kevin Hart is hilarious normally, and here he's just cringeworthy. Zero chemistry with Wahlberg, gross-out jokes nobody asked for, and a script so lazy it feels like it was written by an algorithm. Easily one of Kevin Hart's worst movies, and he's done some rough ones. Some of these scenes are just straight up degrading. I don't know how much they paid Hart to do that on camera, but it couldn't have been enough. Netflix probably would have been better off lighting that $80 million on fire. Next up, The Gray Man, big-budget spy thriller from the Russo brothers. Ryan Gosling, Chris Evans, Ana de Armas, even Billy Bob Thornton. Budget was nuts, around $200 million. But it just didn't work. Critics basically called it empty, soulless. The Atlantic said it straight up feels like something made purely to set up sequels and show off expensive filming locations. Everything gritty, everything interesting, totally polished away. Critics didn't like it much. 45% on Rotten Tomatoes, and audiences weren't crazy about it either. But somehow Netflix is already talking sequels. Guess when you've thrown that much money in, you've got to keep going no matter what. Another expensive action movie that just completely missed. Gal Gadot plays a secret agent named Stone who's trying to protect a powerful AI called the Heart. And from there, it's basically Mission Impossible, but bad. This movie had about $150 million to play with, and it still turned out completely generic. It's just a bland mix of better movies, stock characters, nothing original anywhere. Rotten Tomatoes had it at 31%, Letterboxd around 2 stars, and that's honestly generous. Critics really went after it, calling it sloppy, forgettable, and tasteless misfire. It's exactly what you'd expect from a movie built by committee instead of filmmakers. And of course, Rebel Moon from Zack Snyder. 2 movies here, A Child of Fire and its sequel, The Scar Giver. Both were basically disasters with critics. They called it a ponderous slog, gave it just 22% and 16% on Rotten Tomatoes. Letterboxd ratings hovering around 2 stars or less. Snyder got handed a giant blank check for these movies. Combined budget around $166 million, according to Screen Rant. And what he made with all that money is basically an endless, boring mess. The story is something about Sofia Boutella as a Luke Skywalker-type character fighting against her adopted dad and saving the galaxy. Honestly, it doesn't matter because the whole thing is just bloated, slow, and confusing. Not exactly what Netflix was hoping for. Jennifer Lopez did pretty big streaming numbers with The Mother. It was the most streamed Netflix film of 2023, so Netflix figured they'd double down on J-Lo. And that got us Atlas, which cost Netflix something like $100 million, and pretty much nobody liked it. Lopez plays an astronaut who can't stand AI, but ends up stuck with an AI called Smith on her spaceship to help her save the world. And honestly, nobody really knew what this movie was trying to be. Critics basically roasted it, got 18% on Rotten Tomatoes. Empire magazine said Lopez did her best, but no amount of movie star charisma could save this thing from being a mess. Same story over at Letterboxd. Average was 2 stars, and a ton of people said it was like watching a recycled sci-fi movie you'd already seen. Basically, this whole thing felt like something Netflix slapped together in a hurry. Weak story, cheesy dialogue, characters nobody cared about, and 0 new ideas. When you're spending $100 million, that's going to be a problem. It's the kind of movie that just floats off into the streaming abyss, forgotten pretty much the second the credits roll. Back when Netflix first started dropping big-budget originals, they made Bright, budget around $90 million, Will Smith as an LA cop, but with orcs, elves, and fantasy creatures mixed in. Sounds kind of fun, right? Except it wasn't. Critics hated it. Rotten Tomatoes score was 26%. IndieWire straight up called it the worst movie of 2017. Audiences on Letterboxd didn't feel much different, averaged out to around 2.3 stars. But then here's where things got weird. Regular viewers on Rotten Tomatoes and Netflix itself kinda loved it. RT audience score was 90% at one point. Google users loved it too. The critical reaction was so rough, director David Ayer got into public arguments with critics, even dared one guy from IndieWire to write his own script. Honestly, you can see why he was frustrated. Netflix spent a ton on it, and critics called it trash. But regular people seemed into it. One of the actors, Joel Edgerton, even said critics probably got a little carried away hating on it. Either way, it still ended up being considered one of Netflix's first big, expensive mistakes. Another recent Netflix flop was Damsel, and again, Millie Bobby Brown got stuck in it, just like with The Electric State. This one cost around $60 million. Brown plays a princess who has to rescue herself from a dragon instead of waiting around for a prince. Critics weren't impressed, 56% on Rotten Tomatoes. Letterboxd users settled on a pretty May 2.5-star average. One reviewer at The Telegraph said the movie felt like something Netflix built using an algorithm, that it could have basically been directed by AI, and called it atrocious. Pretty harsh, but honestly, watching it, you kinda get what he means. Not the worst movie Netflix ever made, but definitely one of those expensive Netflix originals that nobody asked for, nobody cared about, and nobody will remember a year from now.